And welcome in once again. I'm Dave Johnson to Off the Court. You know the deal. This is our weekly question and answer series exclusive to you season ticket members right here on the DC 12 Clubhouse. Fun place to hang out. And you know how it works. You're going to hear directly from the individuals that make up our monumental basketball department as we are getting set for a season. Thanks so much for all those who submitted questions for John Thompson III and tuned in last week. That was just such a wonderful conversation with JT3. And again, we appreciate those submission of questions. We're going to be getting to your questions in just a moment, but patiently waiting our special guest for this week, Brett Greenberg. He's Assistant General Manager for Strategy and Analytics. His other job is to sit next to me on the plane during the playoffs. So we're going to count on that because that means making the playoffs. And Dean Oliver is the Assistant Coach for Analytics as well. Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. A few years ago, they asked me to write an article on analytics, and it was the toughest thing I had to do because you're talking to a C math student. So we're going to get a lot of intelligence here, and you guys can share with us what this is all about. But I'll start, first of all, with you, Dean, Assistant Coach for Analytics. Explain, first of all, what that title means.
Well, first of all, we'll break it down. Assistant coach means you're with the team. You get to communicate with the players directly. You're in all the coaching meetings. You're there to answer all the basketball questions, but the analytics part comes from the perspective with which you answer it. So coming from, in many ways, I wrote the book on how to do analytics in basketball. Like, I've thought about a lot of the questions you have to answer in those coaches' meeting. What strategies we should take? How do we develop our best players? How do we develop some of the young players? All of these kind of things. It just means bringing a numerical perspective to it.
You mentioned that because in all seriousness, I struggled about 6 years ago to write an article on this. You were able to take that information and make it simple for the players and other coaches to understand.
That's my job. I mean, I will never say I get to be 100%. Communication is never 100% no matter what business, but I try to be as good as I can. And it's a job that I've been working on for a long time now.
All right. And Brett, let's talk about your role, Assistant General Manager for Strategy and Analytics. How does that differ from Dean's role, and what's it all about?
Yeah, so Dean works directly with the coaches. As he said, an assistant coach. That is not my job at all. I work directly with the front office, and then we all come together and communicate as a staff together. And so the crux of my job is working with our front office group and helping us make informed decisions with regard to the roster, strategic planning, future planning, and then also making sure that we are able to provide Dean with anything he needs for the team in season, and hopefully, as you were saying, for the playoffs and beyond.
And I know a lot of our DC 12 club members watching this, they might have, young people that are interested in this emerging field of analytics. I want to get this take from both of you. Just talk about, we'll start with you, Brett, since you just finished up, and then we'll get to you, Dean, just your background and how your journey led you to this point.
Yeah, no doubt. A lot of luck definitely went into it. But I just loved basketball growing up, played as far as my abilities would take me, which was JV in high school, and really knew even when I was in high school that I wanted to be involved in basketball somehow, and thought I wanted to coach. But the idea was, hey, if my playing days are coming to an end, how can I stay involved and help prepare myself for what I want to be a career in sports, and specifically basketball? And so the advice I got and that I used was to become a student manager. And so my last 2 years in high school, I was a student manager for a Division III basketball team. And then in college, I was a student manager, and I learned how to break down film, and fortunately was able to break in as a video intern into the NBA with the Miami Heat. And from there, joined the Wizards, and I've been here ever since. Started in the video room with the Wizards, and so a lot of luck. But I think being a manager and knowing that I had to find other ways to kind of continue my path other than playing at a young age really helped me.
Yeah, and again, a lot of work is you would go to work going over that video on the plane while I was going to sleep. So you were right at it back. I remember those days. And quickly, give a shout out to the schools you were involved with. When you were in Division III and a basketball manager, let's hear it for those schools. Give a shout out to those schools.
Yeah, no doubt. So I went to high school at McDonough, and that's where my career ended at JV, and then was a manager for what is now Stevenson University, but it was called Villa Julie back in the day in Maryland. And then I went to Duke University for undergraduate, where I was a manager there. And then Miami Heat and Washington Wizards.
I think Stevenson's has some of their campus on where the old Baltimore Colts training. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Yeah, it's incredible. So when I was there, they had not moved there yet, but I've been able to go to a couple games over the years where they moved into the new facility, and it's unbelievable. It's where the old, as you said, the old facility. So their facilities, I think, for a D3 school have to be better than anyone. And they have their athletic director, who's the head coach, is incredible, Brett Adams. It's a heck of a program. All
right, Dean, let's talk about your journey. As I understand, a statistician, and you touched on this, a bit of a pioneer in analytics. And again, I'm not exaggerating it. I mean, we're not even talking about a very old industry or discipline, really. I mean, talk about your journey and just how new this really is.
It is new. Certainly, the word analytics hadn't been invented until after I wrote the book. So the word analytics is not in basketball on paper. I wrote that in 2002, but in many ways the field has developed from the book and other contributions, without a doubt. They're out there. But yeah, so like I played basketball. I played Division III basketball. Stopped after my sophomore year. I actually lost the sight in my left eye when I was a kid, so I have no natural depth perception. I love to play. But what I do have that is natural and helpful, I'm really good at math and science. When I was in high school, I was, to make an analogy, like a McDonald's All-American kind of math and science kind of thing. That's what I naturally have a gift for. But I love basketball. And as Brett kind of said, there's a lot of work. But because I love basketball, I never felt like it was work to kind of study what was in the numbers, watch games, try to understand. I mean, frankly, the reason I looked at the numbers is I didn't want to be wrong. When I look at the draft, like Brett is doing significantly now, how do I be more right? When I look at coaching, how do we be more right about what strategies we take against pick and roll? How do we stop LeBron? All of these kind of things. Those were I wanted to be more right, and whatever I could use to gain that advantage, I would look at.
And go ahead, give a shout out. Let's get the schools involved. You're Division III. Where were you playing before you?
So I played at Caltech, which is in Pasadena, California. Much more known for its Nobel Prize winners than its NBA players. That was quite. I graduated in 1990 at that time, and one of our claims to fame as a basketball program is that Greg Popovich was actually in the same conference with us, and we beat him. And so when I was a freshman, I remember we came in and why is Pomona, which was Pop's, that's where he was coaching, why are they playing Kansas? They played Kansas our freshman year, Division III school, and they got killed. But at that time, Greg Popovich was no one. Or he was another D3 coach. And turns out, he's very aware of Caltech.
And what's the nickname at Caltech?
The Beavers.
The Beavers, okay. I was going to guess engineers, but I guess I would have been wrong on that.
Nature's engineer.
But I mean, quite frankly, it seems like a dream job. You were talking about passion for math and a passion for basketball. Your dream job exists, basically.
It didn't exist when I was in college. Certainly, I think sometimes dreams are kind of fantasies, right? Like, you have to chase them so far as you can. And I managed to really create the job that I wanted, no doubt. And I know how hard that is for most people. And I know it's not realistic for a lot of people, but you can always try to make it a little bit better. And this was a risk. Certainly when I took time off from being an engineer, professional engineer, to write the book, and that opened up this job. So I took that risk at the time.
Well, that's what it's a great lesson here. We're going to get the questions from our DC-12 club members. Again, thank you for finding us on Off the Court, the DC-12 Clubhouse, visiting just two terrific individuals, Brett Greenberg, the Assistant General Manager of Strategy and Analytics, and Dean Oliver, the Assistant Coach for Analytics. See, I can barely say analytics, and you guys are doing it. All right, let's get to some of the season ticket questions. Brett, this is coming from a middle schooler, and the question is for someone aspiring to work in an NBA front office one day, what are some of the steps? And you talked briefly about it, but just if you were giving advice to a middle schooler, how do they start to take the steps to get to the NBA and basically follow in your footsteps?
Oh man, Dave, from a middle schooler, that's awesome. I think, sports now, that there's, as Dean kind of alluded to, there's so many jobs in sports now. And so I think if that, whether it's I'm going to play as long as I can, or I'm going to try to get involved elsewhere, when you're that young, I think you just have to stay curious. You need to see what you like, what you don't like. That can be in terms of trying experiences, maybe, be a manager in high school, right? If you're not good enough to play. It could also just be taking a math and science class, taking an intro to data class, taking an econ class, really kind of finding out what you like and what you don't like. Even though I knew I wanted to be in basketball, when I was in high school, I was so certain I wanted to be a coach. It was like, no one could tell me anything different. That's what I wanted to be. And then in college, I started studying the NBA salary cap and became obsessed. And it was like right then the light bulb went off and I knew what I wanted to do specifically. And so I think when you're that young, priorities can change, finding things that you like, and just as importantly, if not more importantly, finding out what you don't like as much can be really valuable. And so if you're set right now in sports and basketball, I would say stay involved however you can, even at your age. If it means classes, if it means trying to be a manager, and just learning. There's so many resources out there now in terms of the internet and in general that weren't available in the past. And so there's, really, if you just have a curious mindset and a mind that wants to learn consistently, I think that's kind of the key. And then as you get older, you'll find out what you like, what you don't like, and it can change. I think that's important, right? It can change. It could change for me and Dean, even though we've been in the field for a bit now, still. So I think that's kind of the best advice I would give. And that's humbling to, anytime anyone asks that question, and especially if it's coming from someone who's in middle school.
Again, and this is a great conversation for parents of middle schoolers or younger. It is a common theme, and we just heard it from Dean. I mean, basically, he wrote a book that ended up creating a career. So, if you're young, don't think there's a wall in front of you. You just crash through that wall. And Dean, another question covering the season ticket members in the DC-12 clubhouse. Can you talk through the process of analyzing numbers in a game? As you just illustrated the interaction you have with coaches. And maybe can you give an example of how you maybe coach a player based on a trend that you're noticing?
Within a game, a lot of times what I track is some of our pregame emphases. So we may have an emphasis for a certain defensive tactic on a pick and roll, for instance, and I want to make sure we're executing that the right way. And then there will be more general things, whether we're attacking the rim, whether we're attacking from three, how we're some of the general emphases for the course of the season are along with specific things. Those are the main things you can bring in. You have to communicate them very quickly. When you get to halftime, you really have 5 minutes. Really, we have 5 minutes, and that's 5 minutes for our whole coaching staff. That's Scotty all the way down to anybody on the bench. And to get that communicated across in 5 minutes before we then go talk to the players, and then we've got to be back out on the court. So it's really quick within a game. Over the course of the season, managing player development and such, we're really checking that the things that we're doing with the players, very specific, are aiming them towards the goals that we have, to make them better players for us in the short term and for them in the long term as well. So you set certain goals, and those goals are built, and then you just try to track those goals over the course of the year.
And again, what you're talking about is you take the information and then you're giving a message to a player that they can easily understand and then apply and execute, because you're the one that does the hard part, deciphering what the stuff means.
And then translating. I mean, translating is hard too. The deciphering of what it means. Hopefully you go into a game and you have a pretty clear idea what you have to decipher. But same thing over the course of the season. And then, it's sound bites. You have to make sure it's quick sound bites of the player, because there are a lot of people in their ear, not only at the coaching staff level, but the people they're with, and you want to make sure that you maintain that good communication.
Yeah. Just radio announcers, we never give suggestions because that would be the wrong that'd be the wrong way to go. Maybe this is for Dean, but if you want to jump in, Brett, as well, we'll go to the next question from a season ticket member. How can analytics be applied to making the current roster better on defense? And it sounds like some of what you were talking about, you have trends of where the Wizards have success playing various pick and rolls or whatever the case may be.
For sure. There's short-term things and there's long-term things you can do. And I always break things up that way. There's short-term things which are changing your own tactics, things you can do within the game. There are things that guys learn very quickly because they were just unaware of it. They're unaware of the step that they have to take to actually be out to a shooter because they were unfamiliar. We had a young team last year, getting them more familiar with players. Some of those things you can teach very quickly. And then there are other things that may take a little bit longer. Just understanding the balance when you're trying to defend on the perimeter, understanding how to shift your weight. Those kind of things may take a little bit longer.
I was going to say, it might be something, as you said, soundbite, telling a player, you know what, you can't let player X go to his left or his right or take that first step. He's got to be closed down. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, some of those things we can measure, and you can measure that, and then you communicate it. Sometimes the measurement isn't as direct as what you're saying, like, oh yeah, you can't let them go left off the dribble. Sometimes you have to interpret from a number of other things, but yeah, ultimately the communication has to be that simple.
And maybe this is for you, Brett, in your role. How much does Tommy Shepard, our general manager, use in-season analytics to address the roster needs? How often is he coming to you and looking to get that information and maybe take a look at the entire roster?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think at the front office level, Tommy's philosophy, our philosophy, is basically that analytics is a form of information, right? And I know it's a fancy word that you were joking about, struggling to say, but really it's just a form of information. And so as a group, our goal is to make informed decisions. And so to that end, if we have more information that can help us make better decisions, why wouldn't we use that, right? So that's kind of our philosophy overall with it. And so, yeah, we are, more and more, wherever we can kind of get ahead, stay ahead of the trends and see what's next. We really use information and data to make every decision that we have. So the answer is, I don't want to speak for Tommy, but as a group a lot, and Tommy really, really values data and information in general so that as a group we can make informed decisions.
I'll get both of you to comment on this. As another question, how do you, or can you use stats to determine a player's floor and ceiling, if you will? And Brett, I'll start with you, and then Dean, get you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, and I think, well, I guess we can't really get into secret sauce stuff, but Dean kind of, that may or may not be something that Dean specifically looks at. So he'll have a better answer. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that first off, we have a great staff, right? Like, I know I'm here, but there's in our front office, there's people that are all much smarter than me. Joe Sill, is incredible and really kind of our secret weapon in this world. And then Zan Joffrey and Ben Eidelberg, Sam Kaplan. I'm gonna forget people if I keep going. So we have a really good staff of smart people that are looking to find the answers to all these questions. But it's something that when we're making roster decisions, we for sure want to know, how good can this guy be, and also what's the worst case scenario, right? If things don't pan out, well, what are we at least getting worst case? And so I'll turn that over to Dean and put him more on the spot, since he looks more directly at this type in terms of the numbers.
So it is, I will compliment the person who asked this question, because I think that's one of the most important things to do in this business, is ask the right questions. And understanding that that's an important one. The floor and the ceiling is what forced me to do some of this work. So before I joined the coaching staff, I worked in front offices for a long time. And I had this question and I didn't have the answer right out of the gate. But what I would do is I was kind of challenging, what does it mean to be the floor? And what does it mean to be the ceiling? Like Brett kind of said, if everything goes right, this is how good they would be. And if everything goes wrong, and from that perspective, you can start crafting some mathematical analytical approaches to answering those questions. There are statistical methods out there for approaching those. And as I say, it is really about that question. And there are many others that get involved in the draft pick selection. And it's maybe, the hard part may be developing some of the answers, but the question is very important.
And that, of course, the draft coming up November 18th. We'll get to that, but just we'll combine a couple questions here from season ticket members. And since Dean, you just were talking about, why do you think it took so long, or did it take, in your view, long for the embracing of analytics? And where do you see this discipline in 5 or 10 years?
I think the reason it takes some time is because it always does. I give credit to people like Billy Bean in Oakland, because there are things that can go wrong. I mean, it's not as though you just jump on the computer and listen to what the computer says. You have to vet it. You have to check things. And certainly in those early days, I remember some of the things I thought about 20 years ago, and like some of those ideas were not good. Hopefully most of them were, but you're trying to use it to be a positive tool. So that's why it takes a little bit of time. And we want to get the first mover advantage, but there's an advantage of being the second mover too. And I think some of those second movers in the NBA, they found it. It's going in good direction. I think with regard to looking out 5 to 10 years, we already have more data now than, a lot more than when I wrote the book. The fact that I wrote the book with box score stats, and then play-by-play became a lot more plentiful. And now we have player tracking data that shows where everybody is at every single point in time. We don't have where their arms and legs and what direction they're looking at. And there's certainly psychology data and things like that we may start to get and may help us answer some of those important basketball questions. But that's where I think we're going.
And Billy Bean, of course, the legendary Oakland A's general manager who's had such success. Brett, your take on the transition where analytics now has become a part of the game, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think not to kind of give a similar answer, but I think the more that people see it can help them make decisions, the better. And I think now, as Dean alluded to, there's more confidence that the data is correct. And I don't know if part of that's because teams have more people working on it and checking it, or there's just a little bit, when you see it in practice over the years and now you see the benefit, that people just start to believe in it more. From our perspective, again, we just look at it as another source of information. So as long as the information is good, and it's our job to make sure that we're parsing out what is good, as Dean alluded to earlier, and then communicating that. So from that perspective, it's just been natural for it to become a growth and big part in our organization. Moving forward, I think technology, which Dean also talked about, is going to be the key. And what's next? Is AI going to take over? I guess the whole world, if we're going to have self-driving cars in however many years. But is it, is AI taking over? What's going to happen in the data space next? Where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years? And that's what we're trying to kind of get ahead of. But at the same time, I think for any of us to really confidently say for sure we know where it's going, right? We don't. We're just going to try to stay ahead of the trends and try to make sure we don't fall behind at all.
Even without a change in the data, I think one of the things I think about is Wall Street. Like Wall Street, they have had an evolution in data. It's a little bit more rapid and such, but the fundamental data itself is not hugely different. But the use of computers to actually work with that data and really understand what that is has revolutionized, of course, Wall Street. And we have computers making trades on Wall Street and things like that. I don't think we're going to get there in the NBA, but just a point.
So computers won't be making trades in the NBA. That's not going to.
I don't think so.
It'll still be the old-fashioned phone call. It'll be. And by the way, just to clarify, AI is artificial intelligence, right? Not Allen Iverson, right? Right.
Correct. Sorry about
I just,
that. Artificial
just wanted
intelligence.
to bridge that gap. All right. Now we're going to wrap it up here as we're having this wonderful discussion. We really appreciate the time today of Brett Greenberg, the Assistant General Manager of Strategy Analytics, Dean Oliver, Assistant Coach for Analytics here at the DC-12 Clubhouse. And briefly, as people are interested about the draft, I'll start with you, Brett. Just describe what your role is now, specific to leading up to the draft. And then Dean will get you to answer the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. So this year has been a little bit of an unconventional draft prep compared to normal years. We normally kind of have our groups watching games during the year in person, and this year they got to do that. But then normally the season ends, and outside of not having an NCAA tournament, but then we get going with draft workouts and the combine, and that all leads up to agent workouts also. That all leads up to draft week. And so this year, the only difference is everything's been virtual. There was a combine that the NBA did an amazing job with, but it was all virtual. There's interviews. We've done over 100 as a front office, all virtual. And so this year it's been a little bit different as we're getting ready to prepare, but the fundamental crux of what we're doing is the same. And that's taking all the information that we have, all the data, all of our scouting reports, all of our medical reports, all of our cognitive testing, and all the intel on players' backgrounds and characters that we have, and putting it all together and ultimately forming a draft board that our group's going to feel really good about and we'll be fully prepared for draft night. So this year it's been a little bit more unconventional, as has a lot of 2020, but we're still kind of using that unconventional process to get to the same result as normal.
And Dean, your process leading up to the draft, and I think you also just answered one of our other questions here, was the shortened college season has had an impact, and you've had to adjust on the fly. Dean, your process going up to the draft, and did the shortened season affect your life?
My life changed a lot just when I got the assistant coaching job. It was my first year on the bench with the team, so I don't know what normal completely is, given that this was my first year doing explicitly this. So I can roll with it. Regarding draft prep, Brett is looking at everything. He's got the big, wide picture. My role is in some ways to just harass him with some of my opinions on that come from, I'm watching a lot of tape. I'm putting it together with analysis that I've historically done on players. And then I'll talk to Brett and other people and say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. And it is analytically, it has an analytical perspective out there. And sometimes Brett has to be very diplomatic in responding to some of my comments, but it's fine.
Hope not.
I realize I am providing, I have some unique insight here because I have done this before, but I know there's a ton of stuff that he is dealing with that goes outside what I can see. So that's my role right now.
So it's a little bit of short-term, long-term. It's always trying to plan for both at the same time. All right, guys, quickly here, the stats that you think important in evaluating this draft process, and is there do either of you have a favorite stat in terms of a stat that shows potential as you break things down? And Dean, I'll just start with you. As you were saying, you were sharing some opinions. Is there a big stat that you say to Brett, hey, keep an eye on this player, he's got X in his favor?
I wouldn't say that there is one thing specifically. It is, and if there was, I guarantee you I wouldn't be telling you that. But it is, there are a number of things. It really does depend upon the position. You're analyzing it for I also think that if there was one specific thing, we all would have figured it out by now. I like the common thing is like, okay, age matters. If you're a little bit younger, yeah, that kind of helps. But we all know that. That's all kind of baked into the analysis that we do.
Brett, or do you have favorite stats that you look at in evaluating the draft?
I would say the same thing to Dean. I know we're all on the same team here, but some secret sauce stuff in case people from other teams are watching to get some of that. But no, I mean I think at the end of the day, our goal is to win games, right? And so I know that that's obvious, but just breaking it down at that level. And so we're looking for players that we think can help us win games. And so breaking it down at that level are the conversations that our group has with Dean and the coaches, and that who can help us win games and what does that mean, right? And so I think, 20 years ago, maybe everyone thought that was who averages the most points, who averages the most rebounds, and Dean can share more perspective on that specifically in terms of how it's changed since then. So now the only thing I'll just say, it's more complicated, right? We have all this access now to technology and to data that we never had before. And so we're able to kind of answer that question in a much more profound way than in the past. At least probably when I was growing up, just a fan. Having said that, Dean said earlier, we don't have all the answers. I mean, we're trying to take, even in this draft, right? There are a lot of players that are freshmen that are 18 or 19 years old that played X amount of games and X amount of minutes. And as you said, their season was cut short this year, right? So there's still a limit on certain data that we have access to. But we're trying to do the best we have with the data we have to really figure out who's going to help us win the most future games.
This has been so much fun, and we've got a question coming up for you too that I think you already have answered. So we might collectively have to answer this question. But again, I want to tell that everyone in the DC-12 Clubhouse, you have a chance to win great prizes each Thursday in our DC-12 Club Trivia Challenge. Each week, we have our guest answer a special question that reveals a fun fact about themselves. Their answer is then featured in our Trivia Challenge. Now, Brett Dean, I think we got one of our season ticket members kind of tipped us off on this. As analytics personnel, what is your favorite statistic to use when measuring the value of a player on the court, and why? And I think you just answered that that's something you're not going to share because then other teams will know that. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, unfortunately,
Okay.
That's one of the but it is worth a larger point because we go to the Sloan Conference every year, and we always do talk about, Dean and I have had this conversation that if all the teams just put their heads together, right, and work together, we'd come up with things for the greater good that we're not even able to do right now. But, you're in competition with 29 people trying to gain any advantage that you can, and so it's hard.
So that's the Sloan Conference at MIT, right?
Correct.
See?
Dean has been featured and spoken there many a times.
You didn't think a guy from Towson State would know that, huh? No, I knew there was a Sloan Conference at MIT. So the trivia answer for someone to win a prize, I believe, is the favorite statistic is a secret. It's a secret, and it has to be. And see, you've been a part of a secret conversation today on the DC-12 Clubhouse. Brett Greenberg and Dean Oliver, thank you so much for your time today. Again, thanks for tuning in to Off the Court in our DC-12 Clubhouse. And again, to all our season ticket members, we really appreciate not only your support, but also being involved in submitting your questions. Now, next week, Off the Court, we will have, a very special edition because it'll premiere just hours before, you ready for this, the 2020 NBA Draft. I'm going to be visiting with Vice President of College Personnel, Frank Ross, and General Manager Tommy Shepard right before the draft next week on Off the Court. So be sure to check your email as DC-12 season ticket members and submit your questions today. For Brett Greenberg and Dean Oliver, I'm Dave Johnson. Thanks for watching Off the Court.